Isn't it time to finally rename the Hobgoblin? They really don't have much to do with the other goblin races, other than worshipping the same deity. Goblins are cowardly and not exactly known for their intelligence, while bugbears are pretty much just a bigger goblin with bigger muscles. Hobgoblins, on the other hand, have a flavor that's strangely unrelated to their kin. If anything, hobgoblins are closer to orcs than they are to their namesake. Something many people don't realize is that orcs and goblins actually have no connection in D&D lore. In fact, the two should hate each other because their chief gods are literally at war. This strange lack of a connection between orcs and goblinoids is a noticeable change from Lord of the Rings, where both creatures come from. In Lord of the Rings, the word orc and goblin were used interchangeably to mean the same creature. Hello, Internet. I'm Steven the DM, and this is Monsterology, where I do a deep dive into the tactics of D&D's most iconic monsters. I don't dig too much into the lore because it can vary so much by campaign setting, but I do take a common theme and try to expand on that. Today we'll be talking about hobgoblins. In 5th edition, hobgoblins are one of the most cunning and vicious enemies you can throw at your mid-level party. They think fast and they hit hard. They'll keep your party on the toes for the entire fight. So what is the real difference between a hobgoblin and an orc? This is important to think about because if hobgoblins don't have their own unique identity and personality, we should probably, for our players' sake, just use orcs instead. When you tell your group that they see a pack of orcs, they immediately envision the Uruk-hai from the Lord of the Rings. If you tell your players that they see a group of hobgoblins, about half of them will think, huh? Hobgoblins just don't have that same brand recognition. They are the Pepsi to the Orc's Coke, the Steven the DM to Matt Colville. Similar, but most definitely not the same. Some people joke that the only difference between the two is that orcs have hordes while hobgoblins have legions. On the surface, that's pretty much the same thing, but you can dig deeper and it shows the underlying personality. What you can really break it down to is that orcs are aggressive barbarians that fight for individual glory, no matter their numbers. And hobgoblins are professional soldiers that always fight in a cohesive unit. A good mental image for hobgoblins is to imagine they have the same sense of honor and discipline of a samurai, along with the tactics and engineering skills of ancient Rome. You can even see the Asian influences in their artwork throughout the editions. I don't know how many pictures I'm going to put up. And their lore is chock full of references to the legions of Rome. That's why hobgoblins have legions in the first place. Hobgoblins have the same zeal and drive for war that the samurai had, and the same willingness to give their lives in an instant if ordered to, but they are organized in legions composed of professional soldiers, not nobility like samurai. And every hobgoblin has a chance for upward mobility within the legion if they can prove their worth on the battlefield. And each hobgoblin is also expected to be an engineer, capable of building siege weapons and fortifications. That's right, hobgoblins build more than they destroy, one of the few evil creatures to do so. And that's because hobgoblins wish to rule, not consume. They want to put the world into order, and they're methodical about it. They won't expand their borders until they're absolutely ready, but they will continually harass and attack any settlement close by in order to hone their tactics and basically just give their soldiers something to do. Some cities might have a hobgoblin siege every 5 years like clockwork, and when the city falls, the hobgoblins will take every resource, every last bit of metal and food, and maybe even a few hardy slaves. They'll leave the rest of the population and buildings untouched, and this could go on for decades, until 1 year. The hobgoblins return and lay siege like usual, and when the city falls yet again, this time, the hobgoblins don't leave. The city is now theirs, and the people will quickly learn how to exist in hobgoblin society. Meanwhile, the hobgoblins will dig in and bolster their defenses in the area, strengthening their hold. Now that we've covered the lore, let's build our tactics on that foundation. Bear in mind that I'm going to be talking specifically about hobgoblins, but a lot of this video can apply to any intelligent enemy. Any professional soldier or mercenary will use these same tactics, so you can easily use these tips in any part of your campaign. The most important thing to remember about hobgoblins is that they will take advantage of every single possible advantage every single time. I know I said advantage a lot, but that is the key word for hobgoblins. They do not fight if they do not have an advantage. This means that hobgoblins should have larger numbers than the party, at least a 2-to-1 ratio. They're also night strikers. Hobgoblins will rarely attack during the day, instead preferring to take advantage of their dark vision and force their enemies to fight blind. And the party should be extremely cautious about camping in the woods if hobgoblins are known to be nearby. Hobgoblins also use the terrain to their benefit. Given enough time to prepare, they will literally shape the landscape to their needs, digging trenches, forming hills, chopping down trees, and so on. They hold on to the elevated positions and use cover as much as possible, using ranged attacks when they're unable or unwilling to close into melee. They do this to try and force your players out into the open, trying to disperse or corral your party as needed. Hobgoblins have an ability called Martial Advantage. It's basically a form of sneak attack, where they get to add 2d6 damage if they have an ally nearby. And this means when a Hobgoblin hits, they hit hard. They are shock troops, and they try to bulldoze through your party before your party has a chance to react. Hobgoblins will have a priority target and will focus fire exclusively on that target with a fierce determination. They will put their lives at risk by ignoring your tank if their captain orders for that elf mage to be killed. Even your standard Hobgoblin is smart enough to know not to spread out damage. 6 players at half health are still a very serious threat, but 3 players at full health while 3 players are unconscious? Well, that's an adventuring party in some serious trouble. The first target will be the spellcasters. Like any monster that works in a group, Fireball is its biggest weakness, so Hobgoblins will hit your mages the hardest. They will do their very best to drop the mage in that first round, or at least do some serious damage with a hailstorm of javelins and arrows. And after the mages are down, the Hobgoblins go after your healers. Clerics, druids, bards, anyone that can cast a healing spell, or even throws out a healing potion, will be the next target. And after that, it's mop-up time. If a good chunk of the party is down, the Hobgoblins will probably offer the chance to surrender. If the party refuses, then anyone left with medium armor will be targeted first, with your heaviest tanks probably taking non-lethal damage and being drafted into their free labor force. Hobgoblins learn and adapt quickly. Your party should never be able to beat them the same way twice. Think of them like the Borg. The players will have to consistently create new tactics if they want to survive.
Captain, they've adapted.
Hobgoblins travel in units with a superior officer. There is always a chain of command to be followed, and Hobgoblin captains have a fantastic ability called Leadership. They will activate this ability just before battle so as not to waste an action after rolling initiative. Leadership is very similar to Bless. It allows any ally within range plus 1d4 to attack rolls and ability saves as long as they can understand the orders being given out. This can be very fun to roleplay, and goes a long way into creating a sense of intelligence for your Hobgoblins. You might even go so far as to prepare a small list of goblin words for you to roleplay during combat. The first sign of the Hobgoblin ambush may be "Correct Nor!" meaning attack, and your party might catch on when that same captain yells, "Correct Nor Booyah!" and the entire Hobgoblin unit turns to face your wizard.
We're dead! We're dead! We're dead! We're dead!
Hobgoblins also understand the value of the double tap. A downed character is still a threat until they are dead. So after a character falls, the next Hobgoblin to attack will look the rest of the party in the eyes as he plunges a sword into their downed comrade and gives it a vicious twist. For the record, I do not condone auto-killing players this way. Don't spend the 3 attacks on it, just give them the 1 automatic failed death save, and then move on. This is a great way to up the tension and let your party know that these guys mean business. Despite their evil natures, Hobgoblins do have a sense of honor. They will both accept surrender from a defeated foe and offer surrender when they are beaten in turn. And they do have the awareness to know when they've been beaten. Hobgoblins are happy to prey on the kindness of the good. They know that they will most likely be set free or ransomed back to the Legion, so there's no need to put their lives on the line unnecessarily. They also see the value in taking prisoners. The war machine requires an endless amount of labor, and it looks as if at least a few members of your party have strong backs. Hobgoblins are professional soldiers, and as such, they have standardized equipment across their ranks. They will almost always have the following weapons when marching to war, but they may not carry each weapon into battle, depending on their unit's orders. All Hobgoblin infantry carry 2 pole weapons. One is the javelin, to be thrown in the first round of combat while charging. The other is a pike, for use when in formation. And while scouting on patrol, the Hobgoblin may or may not be carrying this. But Hobgoblins will always have their trusty sword and shield, and this is their weapon of choice because of its versatility, useful both on patrol and on the front lines. They will also be carrying a ranged weapon, usually a longbow because of its portability compared to a crossbow. Every Hobgoblin is trained in both ranged and melee combat, making them a formidable threat at any distance. And finally, the last piece of gear that a hobgoblin will consistently carry is, drumroll please, the shovel. It might seem underwhelming, but every hobgoblin is an engineer, and the Legion will literally shape a battlefield to their advantage, and that means everyone needs a shovel. And while we're talking about weapons, I'm going to briefly mention allies commonly found with hobgoblins. Allies are tools to be used by the hobgoblins, never truly seen as equals. They are disposable and put in the most dangerous situations in battle. Hobgoblins are fond of having tanks. Bugbears and ogres fill this role very well. And while these big guys can be a serious threat in their own right, they're normally a distraction, pure and simple. When the fight starts, your players are going to see a group of hobgoblins, one of which is barking orders, along with a giant-sized ogre swinging a tree as a club. Who are they going to be worried about the most? And your players are somewhat justified in that, but the real key to a hobgoblin fight is the captain. He buffs everyone, allowing them to hit more and stay alive longer. So put your brutes out front and watch the crazy amounts of damage that your standard hobgoblin manages to dish out thanks to martial advantage. The second most common ally is the lowly goblin. Hobgoblins despise goblins for their cowardice and lack of discipline, so treat the little guys as cannon fodder. Goblins will be in the front lines while hobgoblins stay in the back using ranged attacks. Remember that martial advantage is triggered based on the allies' proximity to the target, not the attackers. So your hobgoblins will still be getting that sweet 2d6 damage boost while your goblins are being trampled. A hobgoblin might even direct a ranged attack towards a goblin that flees a little too soon, in order to keep the rest of the goblins in line. Remember, just because you're in combat doesn't mean you've stopped role-playing. Most often, the hobgoblins that your party encounters will be skirmishers. They act as scouts and patrols for the rest of the Legion, and they might be quite some distance away from the Legion, often highly mobile, sometimes entirely cavalry. Their primary role is to provide intelligence for the main force, and skirmishers won't fight to the death. Instead, they will try to signal for reinforcements with flaming arrows, or they will send one hobgoblin as a runner while the rest of the unit holds the line to buy time. Skirmishers will probably be encountered in small numbers. Maybe 8 hobgoblins and 2 bugbears for a level 6 party. If you want something a bit more challenging, then maybe a dozen hobs and an ogre. Alright, we're going to try something new with this video, and I'm going to do my best John Madden impersonation. So in combat, skirmishers will split into several groups with no less than 4 soldiers in each group. One group will stay directly in front of the party and use ranged attacks, keeping their distance even if your players charge. The other groups will then try to stealthily flank the party, attacking each side of the group. Think of them like the velociraptors from Jurassic Park. The hobgoblins you can't see are the biggest threat.
Clever girl.
So in this example, we went with 12 hobgoblins, 11 standard, and 1 captain, along with 2 bugbear brutes as allies. And we've broken them up into 3 different groups. We've got one group here hiding, one group here hiding, and then 4 archers that are using the trees as cover, along with 2 hobgoblin brutes that are out in the open. So let's say that your fighter, or your paladin here, was keeping watch, and he didn't roll very high in his perception. He manages to wake everyone up just in time for these giant bugbears to be barreling towards them. And they are probably going to start holding the line as well. Most likely, your melee attackers are going to go meet the bugbears head-on. Your rogue might try to get sneaky and swoop around to try and attack the archers in the back. That's okay. They will do their best to stay out of range, but if he gets there, that's not a big deal. And then you have your wizard and your ranger. Your ranger may use a bow, or he might use swords. It doesn't matter either way, but he's still going to be focusing towards the archers or the bugbears. And your wizard is probably going to back up to try and get a little bit of cover away from those archers who are targeting him exclusively. After the first round, when everyone meets in the middle and they're in a giant clump around these bugbears with the archers peppering the wizard, that will be when your hobgoblin ambushers flank in the sides. And they'll meet specifically the wizard if they can, or anyone else that's still along these sides. And they will just put him in a vice grip. Your captain is going to be giving orders, and he should be able to reach that whole area, allowing everyone to get that buff, with the exception maybe of your archers. And with everyone in a clump like this, it'll be very hard for your wizard to use area effect attacks without hitting their own party. And that's going to create quite a situation. Let's say that your hobgoblins don't get the ambush and they were spotted early on. That's okay, it happens. You don't need to force the ambush. Allow your players to spot them every now and then. It's fun for them. So what will happen instead is that your party will either try to defend the campsite and stay together, or your melee guys will try to meet the groups that are oncoming and allow your 2 ranged guys to make attacks there. And that is fine too, because no matter how the party splits up, they won't be able to stop the entire group of hobgoblins from descending upon that wizard. And that'll also mean that your archers here will be able to continuously volley into that wizard, just peppering him with arrows. He'll look like a porcupine by the end of the fight. Fights with skirmishers probably won't last more than a couple rounds. Hobgoblins strike fast and they strike hard. If they can't do some serious damage to a single character in one round, that'll be the wizard, then they probably won't last long enough to keep the fight going. By the end of round 2 or 3, they might begin a tactical retreat. Or if things are really bad for the hobgoblins, they will outright surrender, with the captain yelling, "Briark!" and the rest of the hobgoblins quickly throwing down their arms. Alright, we're going to put John Madden away for a little bit. Don't worry, it'll come back. If you want to mix things up, you can have the whole unit of skirmishers be mounted on wargs. And I think mounted combat is a great change of pace from the claustrophobic combat that you normally experience inside a dungeon. If you decide against having all cavalry, consider at least having the captain be mounted. Thematically, it shows his superiority, and mechanically, it allows his leadership ability to reach the hobgoblins that need it the most, with the captain able to easily move across the entire map. It also allows an easy escape for the captain, possibly setting up a future villain. Hobgoblin cavalry are extremely effective in melee combat, because they will always have an ally within 5 feet of their target. Yes, that warg they are riding counts as an ally. That means there's an automatic 2d6 damage on every single hit thanks to martial advantage. And if the hobgoblin is killed or dismounts, the warg is still in the fight, giving a bit of variety to your combat. Hobgoblin cavalry will use their superior maneuverability to safely move around the front lines of a party in order to attack the weaker characters in the back. And mounts act similar to independent creatures, meaning that the mount can move and then dash, and then the rider can dismount, move a bit more, and then attack, all on the same initiative turn. Depending on how mobile your players are, that means you might need a really big map. And that leads us to Hobgoblin Devastators. I love the Devastators because they represent the ideal battle mage. If you ever want a spellcaster perfectly designed for battle, you don't need to create something from scratch. Just reskin the Devastator and use that instead. Devastators have an ability called Army Arcana, which essentially prevents all friendly fire. They can cast Fireball, targeting their own soldiers as well as the party, but control it so that the party are the only ones taking damage. So target your own front lines and never worry about how high that paladin's armor class is again. You can use this to punish your players for clumping together the same way they love to punish your monsters. If you have any repressed anger, this is your chance to get it out. I'm kidding. Bottling up anger isn't healthy and leads to unjust TPKs.
Are you all right?
Oh, no, not fine. Serenity now.
This is probably a good time to mention that in my current home campaign, I do have a paladin with a high armor class, and he never gets hit. It's so frustrating. He has... if I go one more session without being able to hit him, I will spawn Vecna right on top of him. And I keep reminding myself that this is why he plays the character. He built it that way specifically. That's what he enjoys. So I should let him enjoy that. Let him revel in it. Okay, I need to calm down. Help cheer me up. Hit that thumbs up button. Hit the sub button. And you might just save my paladin's life next week. Probably not. I'm probably still going to spawn Vecna. It's going to take a lot of subs to help me calm down. I can't hit him. Lightning comes down crashing through the sky. If I don't get subs, then I'm probably just going to kill him. Either way, hit those buttons. You're doing Paylor's work. Back to Devastators. Devastators can cast Fly and Gust of Wind as well, so there is no reason for your tank to get into melee range. Start this guy in the back of the fight and use his mobility to keep him away from everyone else. Also, don't bother with Magic Missile. It doesn't trigger any of this guy's abilities. It's really a waste of an action. He has plenty of spell slots for better spells. Alright, back to John Madden mode. Finally, we get to the standard Hobgoblin army formations, and these are the really big ones where your party faces off against dozens and dozens of Hobgoblins in a fight that can take up to the whole session if you want it to. This is your Battle of Helm's Deep or Pelennor Fields. Depending on the desired scale, this can represent the entire battle between your party and a unit of a Hobgoblin Legion, or it could simply represent a small front of the battle, where your party leads armies or has allies with armies fighting nearby. Think about Aragorn holding the breach. The camera is only focused on a small part of the thousands fighting, and you should do the same by narrating how the other fronts fared in the battle instead of trying to cram it all into one fight. I don't recommend having too many types of these battles, as they grow tedious in the long run, especially if it's over multiple sessions. But having this be the epic conclusion after a long build-up of rising tension can be a ton of fun. In this scenario, we're going to say that your party is defending one of two passes through these mountains. They're allied with an army defending the northern pass that is meeting the bulk of the Hobgoblin forces. Your party is the sole line of defense. This unit of Hobgoblins is trying to attack the flank of the northern army, and if they go through, the nation falls. Standard Hobgoblin formation is to have a long line with three main ranks. In the first rank will be carrying a sword and shield, while the second rank is wielding long pikes. The third rank stands a ways back and wield longbows, but they will also be carrying melee weapon. If you have an especially large formation like the one I'm about to show you, you can have multiple ranks of pikes and longbows. So in this scenario specifically, we have your melee players out front, and your archer and your wizard are high up above so they have better positioning for their ranged attacks. Our Hobgoblins have one rank of sword and shield and two ranks of the pikemen, along with two giant ogres, and then a rank of archers in the back. This time they're in an elevated position because Hobgoblins will take advantage of that high ground.
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!
Giving them better firing angles onto the wizard and the ranger. And you also have a Devastator who will be further back as well, trying to keep as much distance between the melee guys and himself as possible. Now this is going to be a very juicy target for your wizard to cast Fireball. If he has high initiative, he'll probably get it off. But before closing into range, all of our melee guys, every single one, will be throwing a javelin at the wizard. This formation is still very weak to area effect attacks. Assuming that by some miracle every Hobgoblin passed their dexterity save from an incoming fireball, it's a big if, half damage is still on average enough to one-hit kill a standard Hobgoblin soldier. Hobgoblins are intelligent and capable of recognizing this threat, so once they notice a spellcaster they will spread out into a looser formation, mostly maintaining the same ranks. Once the spellcaster is gone, they'll come back into formation. Remember, unlike goblins or orcs, Hobgoblins get smarter when in larger numbers. This means they will adapt and respond very quickly to new tactics and threats. Alright, let's clear that, while the ogres move up to try and tank a little bit. Your players will probably try to move as quickly as possible, maybe around, or they'll just close right into the gap. You have a captain here in the back who will be giving orders to the main unit, but he might also be moving further back to help your archers. Your Devastator will be casting Scorching Ray as soon as possible on that wizard. If that doesn't kill him, he'll be casting it again the next turn. He will focus exclusively on that wizard until he's dead, and then he will cast Fireball wherever the biggest group of your players is. Your archers will also be firing over the entire melee into your wizard. They will be trying to pepper him with arrows, and they have enough range that they can do it. A longbow has a good amount of range. Your party's wizard should always be the first one to go down. After your wizard is down, your party will be focusing entirely on the cleric. That's this guy right here. Wherever he is, they try to take him out so he does not keep healing, specifically the wizard. When there is a formation this big, there are also reinforcements nearby. Plan this into your encounter ahead of time so you can tweak the difficulty. When the reinforcements do arrive, they will either strengthen the main line or attack from the flank, depending on how many casualties your initial group took. Alright, that's enough John Madden for now. Let me know in the comments down below if you like that tactical view, and I'll continue using it in future videos to give you a better example of what I'm talking about. As the battle progresses, ranks from the back will move forward to replace losses, trying to keep a solid formation. And if you want to have more fun with it, envision the formation as a shield wall.
They're our defense and our weapon! We knock them off their feet! We're a wall!
It's entirely plausible to say that a hobgoblin wielding a shield next to two hobgoblins, one on each side, should have half cover. It's not a huge boost, just +2 to AC and dexterity saves, but it really works thematically, and it emphasizes the teamwork and training unique to Hobgoblins. If the Hobgoblins have lost over a quarter of their numbers without inflicting the same losses onto the PCs, then the unit begins an orderly retreat. First, they will disengage and move their full speed, staying in formation as much as possible. They might also use the shield wall to retreat, with all Hobgoblins readying a movement action so that they can move together. They will rotate the ranks to keep the healthiest Hobgoblins in front, while everyone else uses ranged attacks to cover the retreat. If they continue to lose numbers before gaining enough distance, then they offer to surrender. Hobgoblins like to dig in. When they claim new lands, they never plan on leaving. In the first few days of a legion marching into new territory, their camp will be surrounded by a ditch full of wooden spikes, and after a week they'll have a wooden palisade and probably a second ditch. If there's a river nearby, you can bet that they have already started work diverting its flow into a moat. If they don't keep marching, then a month later it'll look as if those Hobgoblins have had a fort in this region for quite some time. Smaller camps will dot the surrounding countryside, acting as small garrisons and watchtowers for the main force. These smaller camps have the same defensive priority, with an emphasis on trenches and wooden palisades. Given enough time, the Hobgoblins will begin replacing their wooden walls with stone walls. Hobgoblins are just as good at engineering as they are at warfare, and their building techniques vary just as much as humans and elves. When designing a Hobgoblin stronghold, think about what is the most practical defense. Don't worry about making it elaborate or decorative. It can be as simple as a square stone keep. But with that said, don't forget to add lots of spikes. Hobgoblins love spikes. I know this was a long video, but with Hobgoblins being master strategists, we had quite a bit to cover. If you only take one thing away from this video, remember it's that Hobgoblins adapt and react intelligently. They lack emotion in combat, allowing them to logically assess the flow of the battle. If you found this video helpful, please hit the thumbs up button and follow it up by clicking that subscribe button, because I desperately crave the validation of strangers. My next video will be another basic dungeoneering, sharing solid tips on how to up your game as a dungeon master. If you want, you can check out my terrain video or my traps video for a similar idea of what will be coming out next. Until next time, I'm Steven the DM. And it looks as... I cannot talk. Depending on the desired scale, you can represent the entire battle between your party and If you decide not to have all cavalry, consider at least having the Campton. Serenity now!